Pehle Aap.
ठीक है. Hi, I am Ankur Rathee. I am an Indian American actor and also the global brand ambassador for Verona.
Thanks so much. My name is Rahul Subramaniam. I'm one of the co-founders of Verona.
The one thing I probably still do miss about single life, sometimes just alone time. Actually, Anuja also, I think, has told me blatantly. She's like, I just need to be alone right now. Ankur. Like she wants me in the home, but she wants me in the other side of the home.
But again, having a partner who understands that and gives you that space, saying that, okay, yeah, maybe, this evening I want to go hang out with my friends. I think having that understanding of like, look, you've grown up with these people since you were 5, right? You've got an amazing history with them, and I would love to be a part of that. It may not always be possible, but I love that for you, that you have these many facets of your life. And I think, at least in our relationship, having those separate spaces is essential. So
I'm always curious though, like how do you navigate that? When it comes to this childhood friends, yes, but like what about Sanya maybe getting close to another male friend or a colleague or something like that? Have you guys ever had to navigate that? And where are you guys at with that now?
Yeah, I think when we started dating, a week later, she left for her MBA program at INSEAD. Okay. And I don't know if we should say this, but INSEAD's other name is Divorcead.
Oh, really?
Because, you've got like interesting people from around the world. If this is meant to be, it'll mean to be. I don't have to try to control it.
And I think like you seem to be very secure in yourself. You're not necessarily intimidated or feel like uncomfortable with the idea of someone sweeping her off her feet or something like that.
Well, there were some Spanish guys that she talked about. There's a little bit of that.
A little bit of that? Okay, well. In my relationship, because it's been so long, there's certain conflicts that you have that you address and you're able to learn from and grow from. And I'm curious if this happens to you, but then there's certain conflicts or arguments that are just reoccurring.
Kind of related to that though, one thing that we do is if you fundamentally love each other and want the best for each other, there is an optimal solution, right? Trivial example, last week we got into a disagreement because Jez started tearing apart books. So I said, it's good for him to develop the habit of reading. And if he tears a few, so what? Sanya was like, but he needs to respect books, right? The way you wouldn't allow him to step on a book, right, you shouldn't allow him to tear a book. So we actually consulted a child specialist, a child psychologist about this. And I was like, okay, we're at a crossroads. I say, go ahead, tear the books if you want to. Sanya says, absolutely no go. Is there something, what's the right answer? And they said like, look, you both have points. Give him a newspaper once every morning. Let him play around with that. I think this is helpful. This mindset of like, let's continue to discuss and debate until we have an answer that we both get behind. Otherwise, when we don't do this, when there's agreement to disagree, there's a little bit of lingering resentment.
How long were you dating Sanya before you guys got married?
A little over a year.
Okay, so you guys have known each other for about five years or so. One thing I noticed, because Anuja and I have been together, since it feels like kids, is that the opinions you have about things that are to come in the future, whether you want to have kids or not have kids, or whether you want to have this kind of career or that kind of career, or what your moral stance is on this or that. I think for a lot of that, you have to take it at face value. But a lot of it also is just like probably bound to change. Like people evolve and change, especially when you're in your 20s to like now I'm in my early 30s. Like I found that things that I thought were very important, like when I was in my 20s, I thought like being with someone who values my faith as much as I value it is very important. Like how can I be with someone who's not at the same on the same spiritual path as me, let's say. Now I'm just like, oh, that doesn't matter at all. Like, I think it just matters that she has a relationship with the divine, that she is spiritually inclined.
I would have a slightly different opinion in that I feel like people do grow and change, but their core remains the same. And if the core is aligned, like what are those principles you never compromise on. And one thing that I thought is really helpful, and here I think a family is kind of like a company. If you will permit me to draw this analogy, well, a company needs to define its culture. Like what are the values we stand by, even when it's difficult, right? Whether it's integrity or growth. I think that those are some of the principles we've talked about. And I think it's really helpful to have those conversations. I think having those conversations with Sanya have been really helpful when we have philosophical discussions, and we hash things out. If there's some disagreement, okay, let's go back to our core values. If we're disagreeing, we say, okay, which decision would facilitate our growth more? And if you identify that and ensure that there's significant alignment, that allows us to weather any disagreements or storms that come.
I completely agree with you.
How do I mediate between my family and my wife? I don't. I just get a camera and record the Sas Bahu serial, right? Like, I'm getting up. So initially, I'll share that my parents were like, you should meet a nice Tamilian girl,
yeah.
Right? And I said, there is nothing Tamilian about me except my name, right? I don't speak Tamil. I grew up in the US. I live in Delhi now. So I think culture is very important, but mutual respect and admiration is even more so. And I think Sanya in many ways is more South Indian than I am. She has great respect for where I come from. There was a family reunion 2 years ago for a marriage. And it was in February, and it was Super Bowl weekend. And Sanya had never watched football in her life. But she spent the day watching YouTube videos, understood everything about football. At that moment, when I think it was a real great game, and it went down to the last minute, and she was like, "Oh my God, go for the fourth down!" And I was looking at Sanya, I was looking at my wife, who had never watched football before, but she took the time.
Wow,
it meant so much to me, and her taking the time to really enter my world that way was really meaningful.
That speaks volumes about her character, though. Anuja too, very similarly, has really gone out of her way. And I think while we're both Indian Americans, our upbringings definitely have been different. My parents and my entire family is more, many generations in our village in Haryana, and her family is fourth generation Mumbaikar artists. So India being so as diverse as it is, and her being Maharashtrian and an artist and all that, there's just such a different set of values. And for her to have the open-mindedness to see my family and the kind of very tribal culture that it has, and not immediately jump to judging it, is also pretty awesome. Because I wouldn't say that always my parents or my family afforded her that. It seems like Sanya really just wanted to make this work. And I'm so grateful for that.
I think encouraging Sanya to have an independent relationship with my parents. Sanya, as we know, loves her spreadsheets, and she's so methodical and so systematic. And my dad is similar. So if we're planning a trip, I'll be like, Sanya and Dad, can you help us with this? And they gel so much because their way of approaching challenges is so similar. Playing diplomat and identifying specific points of overlap and facilitating those relationships, I think that has helped in my case. What about you?
One of the things that I think shifts after marriage, I'm interested to know if this is true for you, oftentimes you're prone to living a very individualistic life. It's very much about your preferences, the way you like to do things. And when you get married, you're not just marrying another person, but you're marrying into their family. And you have to be a little bit more self-aware and a little bit, I wouldn't say sacrifices, but adjust a little bit to make room for another culture and another set of relationships.
Of course, Sanya's killing it professionally, but I feel like I need to give her the choice to live the life she wants, right? If she wants to take 6 months off while having a baby, she should be able to do that. If she wants to get an executive MBA degree and take a year off, she should be able to do that. I feel like that's part of my responsibility as a husband. I need to be there. I need to be manning the fort and provide whether or not she needs it, and she doesn't need it.
Right. I definitely felt that. I felt that even before I got married. Like, me and Anuja had been dating for 8 years before I popped the question. And
8 years, okay.
Yeah, I took my time. I was like, I don't know if she's the one. No, I just honestly, I felt like, God, am I in the right stage of life to step into marriage? And I made a call to my dad during COVID, and I was just like, Dad, she's the one. I want to marry her, but like, I don't know, like financially it's a big step. Like, I want to make sure that I can be a provider, not just for myself, but for the both of us. And thank God for my dad being who he is. He's like, "Tu pagal hai yaar." If I was in your place, he was like, I would have popped the question a long time ago. She's clearly the right person for you. But yeah, I feel a whole nother responsibility too after marriage. When you were thinking about getting married or when you were getting serious with Sanya, were there any role models or mentors in your life that you went to seek guidance?
I think people in my life, including my dad, but also looking at celebrity role model. I was once at a wedding and there was a titan of Indian industry, like household name, and he was there at a table eating. And I was like, if he can do that with all the stresses he's dealing with, right, which are 10, 100 times mine, it is possible. And I need to open my heart and open my mind and dive into this challenge.
I don't think I can say confidently looking at anyone in my life like, oh, that's a husband I aspire to be like. There's a lot of different traits that I've like picked up along the way where I was like, oh, I really like that quality.
Buffet style,
yeah. Literally buffet style. The only person that I think I've ever consulted is like, my Guruji, in prayer and in conversation with his teachings and stuff like that.
Quick question, because I also love Autobiography of a Yogi.
Yeah.
What was the insight you garnered after meditating on this question?
I think one of the things I realized is like no growth happens without some level of friction. And I think marriage, and the idea of a partner coming into your life is not necessarily there just for like, for fun and to make you feel great and to stroke your ego and for you to feel loved all the time. They're there as a mirror oftentimes. When you're living in isolation and you can be self-proclaimed yogi and do everything in the right way in your own disciplined fashion, but when someone else is thrown into the mix, suddenly you're forced to face certain things about yourself that you didn't even know. And there is inevitable friction, and that friction isn't always bad. How do we now navigate that friction with harmony, with love, with peace? I think that's kind of what our role is on earth. That's how you work through the karma. That's how you evolve spiritually, I think.
Amazing. What does it mean to be a husband in 3 words? I would say, come back stronger. Always.
That's hard to follow up. I will give 3 adjectives. I'll say forgiveness, patience, and love. And as an option, I'll give also a phrase, love conquers all.
Lovely.
Whichever one works better in the edit, I guess.
All right. Those are nouns, not adjectives. But
sorry. Sorry. Oh, shit.